Finally, we were having some tech issues getting on. Tech issues all over the place today. But we are here. Ah, good. Okay, now I'm set up. I can see your comments coming in. This is perfect. All right. We are talking about something that has been coming up quite a bit. Coming up when I reach out to women, like when I'm just like in conversations, like through Facebook DMs or through emails, or even just some of my coaching clients as well. And then it's just kind of like aligns with what's happening on social media, right? Because the social media is talking a lot about food noise and GLP-1s and things like that. So it's a perfect timing for this conversation. So, what we're talking about today is why you can't stop thinking about food and what to do about it. And so one, if you're here live, I always love knowing who's here. So just say live or hey, let me know that you're here in the comments. And the advantage to joining live is you always got the opportunity to ask questions of me. So Sharon's waving. But if you're here on the replay, that's cool too, because I know life is still happening when these trainings are happening as well. So I always like knowing who's here on the replay too. It's kind of like a signal to me to say like, hey, I am investing in some time into myself and into kind of figuring this out. And I'm an imperfect action taker here. And so these trainings are about taking like broader topics and then kind of like making them make sense for you and then what to do with them, like what's the practical terms. And of course, nothing changes if we don't do anything with it. In fact, if we are just, saving articles, reading research, doing these trainings and things like that, hi Jen, then what it does is it creates a bigger gap between what you know and what you do. And then that becomes even frustrating when that gap becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So at some point, we have to stop listening to all of this different information or collecting all of this different information and start doing something with it to start closing that gap. So here we go. We have a lot to kind of unpack in today's training, and it's certainly, again, what I said at the top of the hour is a hot topic. You're hearing a lot about food in particular, again, with the GLP-1s as well. So it's time we talk about it. So I thought we would start off by talking about what exactly is food noise. So food noise is like this nonstop mental chatter about food. It is the constant like pulling, planning, bargaining, obsessing, craving, second guessing, and this urgency around food or the eating, the hunger, the fullness, and what food means about what food means in relationship to you. So what it says about you, what it says about your habits, what it says about your goals. So it is a signal that something kind of deeper is going on in the body or the brain, or maybe it's the emotions or the habits, beliefs, the environments, or with your relationship with food. So oftentimes it's like, I just want to quiet down the noise, but really we need to start exploring, well, where is the noise coming from? And sometimes it's coming from one area, but sometimes it's coming from multiple areas. So again, it's about root cause, what is causing the food noise to kind of come up. So I'm going to share, some ways it shows up for others, some clients that I've worked with in the past. And every time you hear me say one, I want you to put a tick in your notebook and make a mental note of how many ticks you have on your sheet. Now, if you're like Sharon and you're walking on your lunch and listening to this, make a mental kind of note of how many of these apply to you. And these are common ones that have come up with coaching clients that I'm, currently working, helping them work through, or that I've already coached for in the past. Now, before I read them off, it wouldn't be uncommon for women to hear them and discount themselves. Well, I'm not that bad for each one that you hear. So consider there's kind of like an extreme, and then there's like a more subtle way of it showing up. And whether it's subtle or more extreme, it's still food noise. So I hope that we kind of understand that here, that we have a mutual agreement that we're looking at it. Does this happen to me? Yes or no. We're not looking at it to what level it happens or doesn't happen. It's just whether or not it happens. So here we go. Is the first one is constant thoughts about food, even when you're not physically hungry. Planning your next meal while still eating the current one. I do this a lot. Thinking about what is good or what is bad, like, like if you open the cupboard or the fridge or your lunch bag, or when you're planning is like, that's a good, that's a bad, like whatever that looks like, or maybe it's at a restaurant. Feeling pulled to eat even when you know you're not hungry. Feeling like food gives comfort, maybe it gives you like that little dopamine hit, maybe it's a distraction or a relief. So there's some sort of like emotional thing that it's kind of um, pulling you towards or away from. Feeling like food is talking to you louder than your goals, that's a big one. Planning the next food, we already said that one. The fear of getting too hungry and overdoing it or making bad decisions. So it's like you're what I call advanced eating. So you're not even hungry, but you're like, oh, I'm going to be out of the house for a really long time, or oh, I have this going on, so I'm not going to be able to eat, so I should eat now. It's kind of like advanced peeing, for example. It's like you're eating in advance, even though your body says like I'm satisfied, I'm good. It's just like the fear of being hungry, and when you are hungry, that often leads to bad decisions, right? Thinking about food even after a meal, so you just finished a meal and you're already thinking about what's next or what you could have right after that meal or later. Hearing yourself say things like, have I earned this? Or like different concessions, like you're justifying the choices. Well, I've been good today, I've worked out. Well, I've been eating really clean, so I deserve this. Oh, well, this is called freedom. I don't want to be too restrictive, or I've earned this. Or even making concessions, like rationalizing or justifying. You're asking, will this make me gain weight? That makes you either choose the food or not choose the food. Maybe it's like you're also looking at the calorie counts. If the calorie count's really low, for example, that rice cake, you eat it because it has barely any calories, but it's not something that you typically enjoy or would gravitate towards. What will people think if they see me eating this? So this is kind of speaking to the women who has more food noise or food thoughts when they're by themselves. They give into it a little bit more, whereas they still might have the same food noise or food thoughts when they're around other people, but they don't generally give into them because they're so caught up in what other people might think about them if they did do that. The kind of thought about like, I messed up, so I might as well keep going. So I said I wasn't going to eat this. I ate this thing. I already messed up, or I already went over my calories, so I might as well trickle that into Saturday and Sunday, for example. The judgment around, I shouldn't have that. I just shouldn't. I should be good, right? Or, then it's like, that's not on the plan, therefore I can't eat it. Or what's worrying about, like the scale. Like some people will actually worry about the scale. Other people will not just worry about the scale, they'll actually go on the scale later that day or the next day to see how bad their choice was reflected on the scale. The feeling of feeling out of control around food would be another one, and feeling like you need to get it in now before it's gone. And that one often comes up when you say like, hey, I'm ready to make a change. So then you like go and eat everything that you feel is going to be off limits, because you're like, I need to get it in now because I'm not going to be able to do that. And sometimes that happens because of a diet, sometimes that happens because of Lent, sometimes that happens because you're like, I should drink a lot because I'm doing dry January, for example. So those were all of the different ones, the most common ones over 17 years of coaching women that have come up in various ways. So I am curious, how many ticks did you have out of that list? And if you feel comfortable, drop the number. I'm going to say there's going to be a lot of women who are uncomfortable dropping their number because it's high. But I'm going to tell you that they're going to go straight to the comments and they're going to see, I'm not alone, or they're going to use it to justify, well, I'm not as bad as that person, for example. But it's basically just to say like, hey, where you're not alone in having all of those different thoughts or thinking about having all of that food noise or that inner dialogue that's happening around food. You're not alone. Many other women, this is, and if I said all that and you're like, holy shit, I have a lot of these, well, I've been doing this for 17 years. That should be enough to tell you like you're not alone in having all of that food noise. You're not crazy. And some women have it louder and louder at certain periods of times than others. And some people just don't have a lot of that. I can tell you that my food noise used to be really high. The more restrictive that I was, the higher that food noise was, and it occupied a lot of space in my brain. As I started to like, change my relationship with food and with my body, that was important too. Then the food noise started to quiet down. But also it was looking at, that I wasn't going to solve it by quitting snacking, or I wasn't going to solve it by like quitting, like not having any cravings or anything. I really had to look at what was the inner dialogue that I was having, how often was I having it, and why was that there. So I'm seeing a lot of comments coming in being like a lot of them there. And here's how, kind of women prior to coaching kind of describe it. It feels like obsessive, or it can feel like urgent. It can feel like loud or guilt driven and kind of hard to ignore, like an insatiable appetite or thought, like it's just like incessant there, like your body or brain is hijacked, like you just ate, you're not hungry, you have all of the facts and all of the evidence, but it's like this is just taking over, this is so strong. It can feel like you're seeking comfort or calm or escape or distraction or dopamine or a break, kind of like that emotional eating that we've talked about in previous trainings. And they tell me it gets louder when they're tired, when they're stressed, when they're bored, when they're lonely, when they're overwhelmed, underfueled, dehydrated, or underslept. So once we get into coaching, things start to click. They start to notice things, and it's all about patterns, right? Like when it gets louder, for instance, for example, is it when they're multitasking while they're eating, or eating while they're scrolling, or driving to work, or reading, or watching TV? If there's a lot of clutter or chaos going on, if life feels messy and you kind of want to check out. And when they're around foods they normally aren't around, that's when things get louder. And then on date nights, vacations, holidays, and social events, if your plan excluded them, right? So, in a nutshell, food noise is the constant mental kind of chatter about food. It's not hunger, it's the thoughts. It's kind of like this pull toward, it's this urgency. So, if all else fails in today's training, here's what I need you to understand clearly. Food noise is a symptom of something deeper, a deeper issue. Sure, for some of it is it's trauma, but for others it's more subtly than that. It's maybe under eating. You're like under fueling or under eating throughout the day despite it being healthy. Inconsistent eating patterns, you kind of skip breakfast and you have lunch, sometimes you don't have lunch, sometimes you, whatever that looks like. It could be about your stress pattern, and it could be about a learned pattern. So food noise gets in the way of weight loss if it goes unaddressed, and food noise often gets louder when you focus only on what you're eating and ignore the how and the why you're eating. And food noise is years of thinking a certain way about food, repeated so often that the brain wires it in as kind of like familiar. And the example that I've used in some previous trainings is like, you think about that field of really tall grass. It's like you're more apt to take the path that's already kind of carved out for you or nailed out for you. You're more apt to take that path than you are to then trudge through the tall grass and create your own path, right? So it's like you've repeated that path so often that it's just like so familiar, so common, that the brain will just gravitate towards that. Now, you've probably heard a lot about food noise lately, especially with everything that's going on. And yes, the GLP-1s can turn down the volume. You think about food less, you feel less pull. But here's the thing I need you to know. They quiet the signal, they don't fix what's driving it. So when you come off, if nothing else has changed, right? If you're just using the GLP-1s to fix the food noise, fix the weight loss or whatever, but we haven't been looking at our patterns, we haven't been looking at root cause, we haven't been looking at, our nutrition, our exercise, stress, sleep, whatever that looks like, it'll all come back, right? Because the environment or the inputs haven't changed. So it's not because they didn't work, it's because the underlying pattern was kind of never addressed. So now that we have that kind of outlined what it is, let's cover what it's not, so we're kind of all on the same page. So food noise is not normal hunger. Normal hunger is hunger. That's different. Looking forward to a meal because you really enjoyed the food, or you enjoyed going out to that restaurant, or you're really excited because you finally got dressed up and you got the date night. That's totally different. Having your favorite foods. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky, right? Because food noise can happen around your favorite foods. It's constantly like, hey, I stack the Brookside chocolates in my cupboard all the time. I really, really enjoy them. And so I'm constantly thinking about them all the time. So that's a different kind of approach, or looking at your favorite foods. Mindful eating, it's not, if I wanted to eat the Brooksides, I portion them out. Maybe I'm tracking, so they're in my count, for example, and I'm eating them slowly. I'm not eating them distracted. I'm not eating them because everybody everybody else is eating them, for example, right? A mindful eating is a kind of excluded from that. Planning meals for self-care or for routine, and intentional choices rooted in I just want it because it brings me pure joy. It is also not a simple willpower problem, and it's not proof like, let's say, you're weak, lazy, broken, or addicted. So it's something that only exists because you eat too much or love food. So that's often it's like I just really love sugar, I really love food or whatever. It's that can create food noise because we have this idea of when I love food, it means that I can't track it, I can't balance it, I can't, think mindfully of it, I can't think about eating it slowly or eating mindfully. There's like separating all of those, and something a supplement or medicine fully fixes on its own. That just doesn't happen. And it's a normal part of life or dieting that you should just accept. So now let's look at why food noise gets louder. So, okay. So food noise kind of like it builds, right? Like it starts off and then it gradually gets bigger and bigger and bigger. For some of those, it gets bigger throughout the day. So that's why nighttime eating happens. Sometimes it's like it gets bigger, bigger on the weekends and not during the week. And sometimes it's bigger, bigger, bigger around your hormonal cycle. Everybody has a different way that it builds, but it generally builds and it gets louder for very specific reasons that are often being missed because the focus is always on food itself instead of like what's driving the experience around food. So if you've ever felt like it's manageable some days and completely overwhelming on others, that's really just like the feedback we want to take and kind of problem solve out. And the problem is most of the strategies you've been taught only address one small piece of the system. What I do when I coach women is look at the whole system, not just what you're eating, but how you're eating, why you're eating, and not what's happening in your body. It also what's happening in your body and your mind leading up to the moment. So let's break this down properly. So number one, the first reason food noise gets louder is in inconsistency in how you're fueling your body. So this shows up as, like skipping meals, waiting too long to eat, having coffee only for breakfast because maybe you're like, I don't know if it's fasting, I don't know if it's because you don't get hungry, I don't know if it's because you're rushed, eating light during the day, maybe even grazing, and then expecting yourself to kind of feel in control at nighttime. It's kind of like unpredictable, and when your body doesn't trust that it's going to be fed consistently, it compensates by increasing other signals. So you get more food thoughts, for example, more urgency, more cravings, because from like a biological standpoint, your brain is trying to solve a problem. It's trying to make sure you don't miss the opportunity to eat, right? So when you're under fueled or delay eating, you don't become more in control, you become more reactive later. So you start paying the price later. And so then what happens is like, I need to quit my nighttime snacking, but that's the outcome of everything else that's happened throughout the day. So what I help women do is not fix this, we fix this. So for some women, that's like, let's look at a consistent eating schedule. For some, that's like, let's look at balancing out your snacks and your meals so that this isn't as loud, as frequent, or disappears altogether, right? So number two, the second piece is restriction, and this is where it gets a little bit more layered. Restriction is not just cutting calories or removing foods. Restriction is also how you think about food. And so oftentimes when we think about restriction, we're not thinking about the mental stuff that's happening, right? And if there are foods you've labeled as bad or off limits or cheat foods or things you shouldn't have, your brain attaches meaning to those foods. And the moment something has meaning, it kind of gets attention. So now you're not just eating or not eating, you're negotiating. Should I have this? But I want it. I've been good all day. I'll start again tomorrow. That back and forth is food noise. And the more you try to tighten your rules to quiet it, the louder it gets because now you've increased the tension between what you want and what you think you're allowed to have. Is this making sense? Let me know in the comments by giving me a thumbs up if that's making sense. The third layer is how you're eating. So if you're eating while you're multitasking, you're scrolling, you're driving, you're working, you're standing at the counter, your brain doesn't fully register the entire experience. It's kind of like when I'm on the phone and I'm like deeply invested in whatever I'm scrolling through and my husband's trying to talk to me about something. I can half listen to this, half listen to that. But if I'm fully invested in this, I'm only catching a little bit. And then I find myself saying, can you say that again? I wasn't fully paying attention, right? So it's the same thing with food. It doesn't fully register as satisfaction, it doesn't register as like completion. So even if you're physically eaten enough, your brain doesn't get the signal that you're done. And when that signal is missing, it keeps scanning. What else? Something sweet, something crunchy. That's not your lack of control. That's your brain looking for the maybe like the closure it never got. And know that I understand that life is busy and slowing down is hard when you have so many to-dos, you're managing everybody else's schedules and needs, right? But this is like, hey, is how you're eating often gets missed. We think about, okay, I just need to eat whole, I just need to eat clean, I just need in a calorie deficit, just need to track, I just need to do these things, but we're not thinking about the experience of eating. So what I want you to think about is that visual of I'm fully invested in my phone and scrolling and someone's trying to talk at me. When I mimic that same thing in my eating, like it's no wonder that I can finish a meal and be like, I just want something sweet, I feel full, but I'm just looking for something else, right? Number four, the fourth piece, and this is the one that ties directly into emotional eating, is how you're using food to kind of regulate. So, food is fast, it's really accessible, it's reliable. So, when you're stressed, overwhelmed, bored, frustrated, or just mentally done, food becomes the quickest way to kind of shift your state. And sometimes this doesn't even happen consciously, right? It's just something that is your brain has learned that over time that it's worked because it's been repeated over and over. So your brain just says, hey, remember the last time you felt like this? You did this. Let's go do that, right? So instead of food being just food, it becomes about relief. It becomes about a break or a reward or something that kind of takes the edge off. And if you want more on emotional eating, I suggest you kind of tap into some of the trainings I've done on this topic, because this isn't just about hunger at this point, but about getting to kind of like a state that makes you feel better. So when you try to shut that down with rules or with discipline or just don't do it, you're fighting something that is trying to help you, even if it's not helping you the way you want. Does that make sense? And that's why it keeps getting louder, because you're not addressing the reason it's there. You're kind of trying to override it, right? So yeah. Is this starting to make sense? So it's like, hey, if you're here because I cannot stop thinking about food, we have to look at the different layers. We've now just explored four different layers, what it is and what it isn't. But we looked at, okay, you're inconsistent eating. That's an easy solve for you, right? And if you can't do that, then that's where coaching helps you. But that helps you quiet down the food noise. Then you're like, okay, you're looking at your restriction angle and that mental dialogue around it. Then it's looking at how you're eating, right? And then it's looking at emotional eating. So let's say you have all four of those. Well, no wonder it's so loud, right? It's like you've got four different things working against you. So start slowly addressing some of those to help you kind of reduce some of that food noise that's been happening, right? I won't go too much into emotional eating because, like I said, we've done full trainings on that, and I think that that's going to be more valuable than me just kind of skimming over that. So what we want to look at though is like, if you're here because like, hey, I can't stop thinking about food, but I also have this goal of weight loss. Well, let's talk about this, right? Let's connect the two things together, right? So now, and most of the time when we're thinking about weight loss, we're thinking about eat less, move more, clean things up, be more consistent. And again, none of that is wrong. It's just incomplete because weight loss strategies assume that your eating behavior is stable. But if food noise is really high, your eating behavior is not stable. You tend to be more reactive in terms of your eating. So you can follow a plan when conditions are controlled. Like, let's say you have more time, you're more focused, you have more mental clarity, more focus, and when things feel manageable. But the moment it starts to add pressure, your attention shifts, your energy drops, and your emotional load increases, those strategies stop working. It's not because they're not strategies that can't work, it's because you're not considering all of this other stuff that's happening. So when it becomes, I was doing so well, what happened? I need to get back on track, and that cycle repeats, then we have to look at why the cycle is repeating, because it's the cycle that needs to be addressing, not going back and doing the same thing. It's like always going back to that really bad boyfriend who treated you really bad. It's like going back to that over and over time, because when it's good, it's good. Does that make sense? It doesn't make any sense to keep going back, even though we've probably all done it. I'm guilty as charged here in doing that. but it's like going back to that old boyfriend who didn't treat you over and over because when it was good, it was good. It's the same thing when you keep going back to the approach. No, you got to look at what's attracting you towards them. What does that say about your worth or your value? How should you feel treated in a relationship? It's about looking at all of that, and it's the same thing with food so that the cycle doesn't repeat, right? And so because it's like you're not addressing the foundation, so therefore food noise becomes a little bit more less stable and then louder and louder and louder. So what's the connection in perimenopause or menopause, or aka hormones? What's actually happening in your body is perimenopause and menopause don't create food noise out of nowhere, but they absolutely can kind of turn up the volume. So if you're kind of like, I used to have this, but not to the degree that I'm having it now, or this is all new, listen up. So if you've been sitting there thinking, why does this feel harder than it used to? Or I've never, again, used to think about food this much, you're not imagining that. But we need to understand the why, because if you just say it's my hormones and stop there, you're going to feel really stuck. And if you ignore hormones completely, you're going to feel like nothing makes sense. So let's break it down. So one, the first place is emotional bandwidth, right? So during perimenopause and menopause, there are shifts in like your estrogen, your progesterone, and those directly affect like your mood, your stress, your tolerance, and your emotional regulation. What that means in real life is this, like things that used to feel manageable don't feel manageable anymore. So now those moments of stress or overwhelm or frustration or even just like mental fatigue show up faster and they hit harder. And if the food has been your go-to to regulate even just a little bit, this is where it becomes more frequent. The second piece is sleep. Sleep disruption is one of the most common things I see with women in the perimenopausal menopausal phase. And when sleep is off, everything shifts. Your hunger hormones change, your fullness cues drop, your cravings go up, your ability to pause and make decisions, well, that's less than, right? So now food noise isn't just loud emotionally, it's loud biologically, right? Because now you're like more tired, your brain is looking for quicker energy, and your body is asking for more. And that combination makes the pull towards food feel stronger. The third is we have to look at blood sugar and energy dysregulation, right? Hormone shifts can make your body more sensitive to blood sugar swings. So if you're eating inconsistently, skipping meals, relying on quick carbs, or not balancing your meals well, you're going to feel that more. And when blood sugar spikes and crashes, your brain gets louder and it can start to feel out of control. The fourth piece is, again, the nervous system load. Again, these are all the things that are shifting in perimenopause and menopause, right? So at this stage of life, most women are carrying around, more responsibility, more mental load, more stress, more people relying on them, and your nervous system feels it, right? So now you've got a higher emotional load, less recovery, more fatigue, less space, and food becomes the fastest way to kind of shift out of that. And not because it's the best tool, it's because it's the one that you've been using for the longest. It's the most practiced one, right? So when you put all that together, what you get is this. You get food noise that was maybe manageable before, but now feels louder, faster, or harder to ignore. And this is where I want to be really clear. This is not just hormones, but hormones are amplifying what was already there. So if there was already kind of like inconsistent eating, food rules, emotional eating patterns, lack of awareness, perimenopause just kind of like exposes it all, right? Like an expose on it, right? Hence why eating clean or more whole foods or cutting out carbs, working out more, or not eating at night, all the things stop working. They feel harder to do. That approach doesn't match what your body and your brain kind of need right now. And maybe you aren't experiencing any of these symptoms yet. This is your chance to kind of practice these things that we're discussing in today's trainings and in subsequent trainings, so it doesn't amplify what's already kind of going on. And if you're already there experiencing these symptoms, then remember hormones kind of amplify what has been happening over time. And it doesn't mean that you have to succumb to, well, that's hormones. No, there are things that you can put in place to help you with that. So what actually starts to quiet down food noise, if I haven't really given you those ideas already from this training, let's kind of review some, right? Okay, so this is where we're looking at root cause, right? So we're not looking at, I just want the food noise to end. GLP-1s are not. It's like, we're looking at, okay, what are the things that I can fix, right? So that this quiets down a little bit more, or it's not so heavy of a load to carry, right? It's like I finally put down that backpack full of rocks. So the first is get consistent with your food. Your body needs to trust that food is coming. That means regular meal times, right? So just even the client that I just started, it was like like we had a range, an hour range for breakfast, then snack, then lunch, then snack, then dinner, right? And so, we're looking at laying it out, and then we're meeting again and we're like, did that work? Did that not work? So, even just right now we're adjusting because she's like, well, what I'm eating for breakfast isn't sustaining me until lunch. So we're looking at changing your breakfast, adding in a mid-morning snack. So we're looking at creating a regular routine. I have a lot of women who come to me and say, I'm not hungry in the morning, therefore I don't eat. Well, or I just like grab a granola bar as something really quick. That is a learned pattern. That your circadian rhythm is off. That is a learned pattern. And so what ends up happening to women like that is they start packing the end of their day with a lot more calories, healthy or not. They end up eating a lot more in a shorter eating window closer to their bedtime. And so eating at consistent times is one way that you can help quash down this noise. Just think about it. If I could trust my partner that he's going to show up, he's going to follow through and do all of those things, I can remove the load of like, okay, I know Neil is always going to cut the grass. I don't have to think about cutting the grass. It's the same thing with kind of your body. That builds trust, but then it stops the urgency. And then because there's no urgency, it quiets down the food noise because it just knows, okay, she's going to eat at this time. She's going to eat at this time. This is what she's going to do, right? The second is balanced meals. So balanced meals isn't just about healthy, clean, or whole foods, not eating out, not eating processed stuff. It's a balance. It's a, can you balance proteins, carbs, fats, and fiber? Your body kind of needs all of them to be satisfied. So I'll give you an example of a client who is like, carbs make you fat, and therefore her carbs were always low, always low, always low. And it was always me kind of nagging at her to be like, we got to get your carbs up. We got to get your carbs up. Well, now she's like, oh my God, I'm sleeping better. I have better energy, that sort of thing, right? So when your meals are unbalanced, your body's always going to look for a way to balance it out. It's always trying to achieve this homeostasis, whether you want to or not. That's the goal of the body, right? And so it's always going to try and find it somewhere else to be more balanced. So, and that can show up as food noise. So not only can you be more of a consistent routined eater, but you can focus on balanced eating, right? And the third is kind of removing that moral code around food. The the moment food becomes good or bad, your brain attaches an identity to your choices. Now, this isn't just eating. It's I was good today, I messed up today, I need to fix this. That emotional charge keeps the loop going. So we have to look at, okay, what's our emotional connection to food? What are the stories, the beliefs, or the thoughts that I have around food? That I need to look at that mental script that's running, because if I can get to a more normal place or normalizing food, like not adding the moral value with the food, then it stops calling your name and calling your name, right? So then the food noise becomes quieter. And the fourth is how you eat. So it's exactly what we talked about. It's slowing down, it's being present, it's actually experiencing the food. If you're like, I just love food too much, and or I'm a foodie, then you should be eating slow. You should be eating slow to savor the moment. If I am experiencing this thing and I'm in love with this thing, I want it to last as long as it possibly can. I don't want to rush through the experience. But we do the opposite when it comes to food, right? And five is awareness in the moment. It's asking, what is actually happening right now? What am I feeling? What do I need? Sometimes with clients, it's as simple as count backwards from five, or 5 deep breaths, or walk away, come back, drink a glass of water, come back. It's just enough to create a little bit of space so that you can be pulled back into the present moment and ask yourself those questions. Because when you can ask those questions, then you can really look at, okay, well, it's not food that I need then, it's this that I need. Or, okay, I'm experiencing this feeling, this is why I'm going to food. So when you start working on these things, this is where it kind of will all start to happen. So don't expect food noise to go, from loud to silent overnight, right? It's going to happen slowly and gradually. And this is where your patience comes into play, right? First, you notice it more, then you start catching it earlier, then the intensity starts to drop, and the frequency starts to drop. And eventually, it's still there sometimes, but it's not in charge. That's kind of the goal. Is this training helpful? Was this making sense of like, okay, all of the different layers behind, if I could just stop thinking about food as much as it would solve X, Y, and Z. Well, this is what the X, Y, and Z is that you need to solve first. You need to think about it in reverse. If I solve X, Y, and Z, then this gets quieter. And when that gets quieter, that's when the shift starts happening. So, what I wanted to take away from today's training is that food noise is not something you fix with more discipline. It's not something it's something you need to kind of really understand and work with. It's built from patterns across your body, your brain, your habits, and your environment. And if you keep trying to solve it from the surface, it'll just keep coming back. But when you start addressing what's underneath it consistently, then that's kind of where things starts to shift, right? And it became hard to put all of these pieces together, and often women will do one at a time and then get overwhelmed or exhausted as and feel like it's not working. And that's the advantage to working with a coach. It can help you spot the problem. You're in it. I'm outside of it, looking in and helping you spot the pattern, the triggers, the patterns, loops, making the connections, not just with what you're doing, but how you are feeling and thinking about it all. So doing all this while you're kind of managing life, it just becomes really tricky, right? Especially when you have a lot of dieting rules, conflicting information that you're trying to piece together. So this is the work I kind of do with clients. It gets them to stop guessing and know exactly the why, the what, and the how, and when it kind of in a way that all makes sense with them and fits with the way that they live, how they want to feel, think, and look, not just the weight, but we're looking at it from a health and a well-being perspective too. So this training will only again impact you, if you do something with it. This training only covered one layer, food noise, and there are so many other layers, right? So you can piece it kind of together yourself, invest the time and energy, or the fastest ways to do that through coaching. Not only, we'll put the plan together for you, but it teaches you how to sustain it. It's hard to do it on your own, is what I'm trying to say. So investing isn't just about the cost, it's about the return you get when this stops being such a stressor, easier to kind of implement, and most importantly, sustain. So all you do is reach out, start a conversation so I can learn about you and your goals. And then, you keep kind of piecing these things together. So I hope that today's training was helpful for you and helped you understand why you can't stop thinking about food and some of the strategies that didn't cost you anything, some of the strategies that you can start implementing to change the level, the frequency, the intensity of the food noise that's happening. I'm Coach Cindy signing off.